The announcement of this weekend is Blizzard's telling us that the midnight beta testing will go live on the 11th of November if you are from NA, the 12th of November if you are from EU, and if you are from both, 2 resets from now. So not this weekly reset, the weekly reset after this one is when the beta of midnight goes live. Now, we had our speculation video on when the beta was coming out based on the timing of our patches, and we did say October the 5th or the 12th, one of the two. So we did hit the target in terms of release of the beta. Now, as for the beta itself, Blizzard already gave also the infographic of what is going to be available once you get into the beta right from week 1, from phase 1 of the beta. You will get all of the leveling experience up to max level. You can already test the new spec of Demon Hunter, you have the new playable race, the Haraneer, and housing will not have these playable testing phases like we've had up to now. It will just be open in the beta. The other stuff, of course, things like Mythic Plus, the raid, etc, etc, so the end game stuff will come later. Now, technically, from their own explanation, they have actually marked phase 1 and called it week 1, and then they laid out week 2 and 3 of the beta being all of the end game content. So maybe it will actually be after just a week of the beta when you're getting all of the end game content of the next expansion. Now, obviously, as a reminder of the 3 editions of the game, the base edition, the heroic edition, and the epic edition, the only one delivering you the beta access, and actually also, just like in the War Within, the 3 days early access, is the epic edition, so the pricier one. Yes, also, by the way, you can still pre-order the epic edition now to get access to the beta. In fact, you can pre-order the epic edition at any time, even after the beta of midnight launch, to still gain access to the beta itself. So even if the beta launches on October the 11th and you buy the epic edition on October the 20th, you would still be gaining access to the beta, and also, of course, getting the early access for the release of the expansion. A very important time, by the way. I know it's always supposed to be like this. We always should pay close attention to what we would like to see improve once you are into a beta. That supposedly is the reason why you are into a beta, for players to test the systems before the release of the expansion, to give feedback to Blizzard, right? But obviously, in this expansion in particular, it's a bit more important since we have some major changes to both the specs and to our screens. So not only are we getting a bunch of pruning, abilities removed, passives removed, procs removed, we also are getting, of course, add-ons dying in combat. So this would be the best of time for everyone with access to the beta in about 10 days to be able to go in and test the new UI and give some feedback to Blizzard on what they would, of the many things that they will find, what they would like to see improved in this new UI, since they will have a few months before the release of the expansion. Now, talking about the few months of the release of the next expansion, having the date of the beta is also coinciding with the date of the release of the pre-patch of the next expansion, because alongside the new build for the beta that will become available for everyone, what was also data mined was, of course, the splash art, the splash screen for the midnight pre-patch in the War Within. Now, the deja vu in question is that this is currently following the exact same pattern of what we got in Dragonflight when we were waiting for the release of the War Within, and we got to data mine the splash art for the pre-patch of the War Within, right? We got this one, and what was data mined alongside this splash was the text that it would have been then added to this art, which said the new War Within pre-patch, the Radiant Echoes event, Vanquish foes from Azeroth's past as memories resurface, available July the 30th. And since this one said available July the 30th, it was reasonable to conclude that the splash screen must have appeared on the pre-patch servers prior to that date. Which is ultimately what ended up happening. The pre-patch of The War Within was out on July the 23rd, so 1 week prior to this. If you remember, the release date of The War Within was August the 23rd. So if we are to use the same logic, we have the data mined splash screen for the pre-patch of Midnight. We also have the data mined text for the pre-patch of Midnight, which says the Twilight Ascension pre-patch event, cultist activity is on the rise, something sinister approaches, available January the 27th. So if we apply the same logic, we drag this back down to January the 20th. In Dragonflight, the pre-patch lasted 1 month before the War Within release. So if we also assume that in the War Within, this pre-patch would last a month, this will put the release of Midnight on February the 20th, after 1 month of pre-patch. So with that, we would also have the duration of our beta, coming out November the 11th, and then the expansion comes out February the 20th. So this would put the beta lasting basically 3 months and 10 days. So basically 100 days of beta. It would be a very fast cycle. If you go back to the previous expansions like Mists, Warlords, Legion, BFA, Shadowlands, we are quite a bit longer than that. BFA is the only one that comes close. The others ranged from being 1 month longer to even being almost 3 months longer, like in Mists. Technically, sure, our alpha would also be very short, because our alpha basically lasted 40 days. So between the alpha and the beta, we have a pretty short cycle of testing, which normally it would have been cool to be able to push an expansion up so much faster compared to other expansions, instead of taking around 24 months to go from one expansion to the next. It only takes you 18 months, so things are accelerated. However, you know, as we said the last time, perhaps if there was one time where maybe extending the delay, extending the time between one expansion and the other would have been nice. Perhaps it would have been this one, purely based on how many things are changing and how much time we would want Blizzard to have to make sure their major changes, for example to the UI, come out reasonable and not massively out of date and still unfinished by the time the expansion comes out. But regardless, at least now we have our dates. Some of those are official, like the beta out on November the 11th. Others are speculated based on the data mining done in the alpha. So the pre-patch of Midnight coming out likely on January the 20th, and because the pre-patch has usually lasted a month, it is also likely to mean the expansion of Midnight coming out on February the 20th, putting the beta of Midnight to be about 100 days long. So this was the announcement for today, the discovery also of the data mined info for today, as for our future patches for this game. The more relevant one anyways, because technically we still have 11.2.7 to go through, but nobody cares. You know, the beta of Midnight, the pre-patch, and then the launch of the expansion are the big three ones we are waiting in the future. So for today, it is now time to leave each other after this pretty juicy piece of information. We are starting our goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with of course everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching, see you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I'm not sure, I've been doing this lately, but waking up in the morning, waking up anywhere before 1 PM just feels off.